Okay, this video is going to show how to get up and running with RetroPie. That's the project that emulates the retro games like the Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, Master System, Atari, quite a range. There's something like must be about 20 or so different emulators all packaged up. And this, of course, runs on the Raspberry Pi. So if you've got a Raspberry Pi, it should be pretty straightforward to be able to get this onto that system with an SD card and get up and running. And what I'm going to do here is try to keep to the basics. I've got various other videos that have sort of spin-off areas like how to deal with different video output or controllers or different tweaks anyway. And this is just going to be a basic overview of how to get up and running easily to get a game working properly. So the first thing you want to do is go to the website where the project is held, which is Pet Rock Blog. I've got that on the screen at the moment. You can see the address at the top here. You can type that in, you can read all about the project, and it's also got a forum over here which has got lots of useful information. So if you do have questions afterwards, it's worth going there and posting those up because there's bound to be somebody to help. Okay, so what you want to do, the basic process of this is downloading the data, the image, to an SD card. And there are other ways of doing this, so you don't have to write the image that's already been created. You can install the system or install RetroPie from source, or install it from binaries, or just use the image. And I'd say it's by far the easiest method to use this image. So again, this video is going to be pretty much for beginners and the quickest and easiest way of doing things. But it's also, to be honest, I've been using this for about a year now, this system of RetroPie, and I'm a moderator on the forums there. And I think that this way is often the easiest way. So it's not just for beginners, it can be really useful for those of you who tweak the system a lot. Okay, so first thing you want to do, download the file of RetroPie image, and you can do that if you hover over RetroPie project and go to downloads, fire up the different options you've got. So here you've got 4 different download options. There's 2 for version 2.6 and 2 for version 3 RC1. Now, RC1 came out about 18th of July 2015, and it's currently the 1st of August, so it's the latest version. RC1 stands for Release Candidate, which is basically the version of the software that is proposing to be the final version. So it's unlikely there'd be many changes, if any, between this version and the final 3 version. But I wouldn't let that put you off using it. It's got a lot of advantages and a lot of extra features than the 2.6 version has. So I'd recommend going for the version 3 RC1, and it's also not that difficult to update from version 3 RC1 to the final 3rd version when it comes out, or even if there's RC2 or RC3, it'll be a fairly straightforward upgrade process. So I wouldn't let the fact that it's not final put you off at this stage. But of course you can do pretty much exactly the same steps by using 2.6, so that part's up to you really. Now, they've got 2 versions for each, and the difference is one's for Pi 1 and one's for Pi 2, and that's basically the only difference. So Pi 1 is if you've got a Raspberry Pi that's version A, A+, B or B+, and Pi 2 is if you've got a Raspberry Pi 2 Model B. There's only one model for the Pi 2, which is Model B, so they came out in about February 2015. If you haven't got a Raspberry Pi yet and you're going to buy one, I'd buy the Pi 2 as opposed to Pi 1 version like A+, B or B+. That's mainly because the Pi 2, although really similar, it's much faster in terms of the processor, so some games do run a bit better, and it's basically the same price. So if you haven't got one yet, get a Pi 2. Yeah, so I've got a Raspberry Pi 2 Model B, and I'm going to download that one, so I'll click that link. And then when I do, I get a brief overview down here of the changes that have been in the various version 3 betas. You can see the features that have been added, and you've got 2 options to download. You can either download directly, and you can see in the bottom right hand corner here you get the address popping up. It downloads as a .gz, which is effectively a compressed file, so we'll uncompress it. So you can download it directly, and depends on your download speed, but maybe 20-30 minutes. Or you can choose a torrent download here. There's a magnet link. It downloads the same file just using torrent, and I find that does tend to be faster. So whilst that might take me about 20, maybe 30 minutes, that takes about 5 minutes, something like that. So either way, you click one of those links and you download a file, and the file is about 650 meg. I'm not going to click that now because I've already downloaded it, but that's where you download the file from. And once you've got that, that'll appear wherever your default save directory is for those. I've dragged them across to my desktop, but that's all you need to get for that file stage. Then what we're going to do is write that to a microSD card. Now if you've got a Model B or Model A, I think that takes a normal SD card, but on the PuTTY it's microSD, and the B plus is a microSD as well, so chances are that's what you're after. And if you put that in the, I don't know if you've got a card reader or a USB reader for a microcard or microSD, or maybe your PC takes the card directly, but you need to get that into the PC, and we're going to write that with a piece of software called Win32 Disk Imager. Obviously I'm on Windows, but you can get comparable tools for different systems. So to run that Win32 Disk Imager, you just download it from this site here, sourceforge.net/projects/Win32 Disk Imager. All of the addresses that we'll look at are put in the comments for the video, so don't worry about trying to scribble these down. That's the software here. You just download and install it, and that'll write the image that we've downloaded. So what I'll do now is go to the desktop where I've downloaded the file, and you can see here this is what I've just downloaded, which is from those links we saw here. It'll give you this file. As you can see, it ends in .gz. If I get the properties of that up, you can see we're looking at about 650 meg in size, and that'll be what you're given. Now by default Windows is unlikely to be able to open that, so you do need a piece of software, and that's called 7-zip. It's free and it deals with a lot of different compression files like .zip or .rar, or quite a range, and you just choose which one you want to download here. You've got a 64-bit version if you're on 64-bit of Windows, and 32-bit if you're on 32-bit. If you're not sure, just use a 32-bit because that should work anyway. But I've downloaded that, and that's installed. We don't need to run it specifically because I can just click on the file now and open that. And if I do that, 7-zip opens that. There we go, you can see I'm using 7-zip. And inside here's the file .img, and that is something that the Win32 Disk Imager will use. So we've got the file there, and the easiest way to get that out is just simply drag it. So I'm just going to drag that to my desktop, because Win32 Disk Imager just won't understand or be happy to write the .gz, the compressed original file. You need to take this file out and get it somewhere accessible. You can put it anywhere on the computer. I'm just putting it on the desktop for sort of clarity, really. Okay, so now you've got your .img file. You don't need the compressed file anymore. You can put that in the bin. Okay, now the uncompressed file, it's going to be bigger than 650 meg. We've got nearly 2 gig. So you can see at an absolute minimum you'd need a 2 gig SD card, but that would be pretty pointless because there'd be no room to put any games on it. And in fact 4 and 8 gigs pretty small when you're talking about getting a lot of different systems on there. I'd go for at least 16 gig because the cost is hardly any different to anything smaller. Maybe even 32, and I know a lot of people want to go 64 gig to get a few PlayStation ROMs on as well, which are quite large. As a quick aside, you don't have to run all your games from the SD card. You can mount an external disk, link to a NAS drive, run it off different locations, but then you're kind of removing some of the portability aspect of it, and if you want it as a really portable game system, I think you're better off with a microSD card. But obviously if you want to run a lot of ROMs, including perhaps the whole PlayStation library maybe, then you're not going to get all of that on an SD card realistically. I know a lot of people have had success with 64 gig SD cards, so you could go for that. I think some people have run 128 gig, but to be honest, if you start going that size, perhaps you are better off with a separate data source for it. Anyway, that's a bit off topic. So that's a 2 gig file, and that is what we're going to write to the SD card. And to write it, like I say, we're going to use this bit of software, and I'm not going to download this and install it. It's just like any other bit of Windows software. Hit download there, install the software, then you've got it. So now I'm going to run that software, Win32, yes, select yes there, and here it is, Win32 Disk Imager. Now it will select all of the removable disks over here. So I've got, at the moment for me, it's only got one device that it can see is removable, or that it thinks is an SD card. Now you could have multiple ones here, and it's really important if you do have different drives selected here that you're happy it's the right one. Now I'm going to plug in, actually no, I've just realised it's selected a different external disk for me. I haven't put in the SD card yet, so I'm just going to plug in my card reader. Windows, I'm going to ignore that and that. That's just seen it put one in. Now close Win32 Disk Imager and run it again. Click yes. And now I've got G&H. Now it is important to choose the right one, because otherwise you're going to overwrite something that you really don't want to alter the data on. The quick way to tell which is which: press your start button, press computer, and then you've got an overview of the drives that are connected. Now I can see here I've got H, which is a 4.5 or 5 terabyte disk. That's clearly not my SD card. But down here I've got a drive called boot, and it says 56 meg there. Ignore that. That's just the Windows part of the partition. I know that if my choice is G&H and I've just put that in, that's the one. It's quite clear. I know that is. And if you haven't formatted this yet, it would probably say 16 gig or 32 gig, whatever the size is. The only reason it's telling me it's 56 meg is because I've written RetroPie to it before, and it creates a very small Windows partition that Windows can read of 56 meg. So yours probably won't say that. And also, do bear in mind, when you do write RetroPie to it, don't expect to be able to double click the SD card here and browse through the files and write to it like you might a normal card, because it formats it as a specific type of Linux partition and you can't just browse to it normally. It's quite different. So the fact that once you've written to it, it says something like 56 meg, don't worry about it, it's still done it right. Anyway, I know I want to use drive G, that's the point of that. And here I've got drive G selected, and it says what's the image file, and I want to get this on my desktop. So there, select desktop, and there's my image file. Hit OK, and it's written it there. And all I've got to do at this point, I don't need to pre-format the card or anything, it just happily writes over it. And it's got a 2 gig file to write, so I just press write. It's double check, so you're sure you want to overwrite what's on G. I know G is the right drive, yes it's called boot, yes I want to continue. And then down here you just get a progress bar about how it's doing. And at the end of there you'll get to 100% obviously, and it'll pop up, say complete, and you can carry on and take the disk out or eject it safely in the normal way and put that into the Raspberry Pi, and it'll boot up. Now, it doesn't take very long, you can see it's progressing pretty quickly there. And just to recap, if this is the first time that you're setting up with RetroPie, the parts that you'll need are obviously a Raspberry Pi, preferably a PuTTY. You'll need the SD card, and like I say, I get at least 16 gig, maybe 32, something like that. You'll need an HDMI cable from the Raspberry Pi into your TV or monitor, whatever screen you're going to use, and a power supply. It's quite important to get the right sort of power supply, ideally the official one, because you can sort of guarantee that's going to work fine. But basically, if you've got something with at least 2 amps of power, then it should happily power all the USB cable, the 4 USB ports that are on that if you needed to use them all. But that's the sort of power, because quite often people will say, oh, it doesn't, the games are running really slow, or the sound's a bit corrupted, or maybe in the corner of the screen you get a little rainbow effect, and that's the Pi indicating not enough power. So basically make sure you get the right power. The official one tends to cost a little bit more. I think it's about £5 or £6 rather than the cheaper ones that maybe 3 or 4. But anyway, you need the power. And the last thing that you need is a controller. Now there are loads of different controllers that you could use and work with RetroPie, but if you're starting out, the easiest way to do it is get a USB one that's wired, and perhaps people have already said it works quite well with RetroPie. So for example, I always use an iBuffalo USB wired cable, and you can see those on Amazon and eBay quite often. And the ones that work well, they're about maybe £10–12, that sort of price. You can get ones for about half price that aren't iBuffalo, that are still USB, but they feel a bit plasticky. Anyway, it's up to you. I'd suggest starting off with a USB controller, just to make sure that you don't have any issues. And then you can always move on to get maybe a wired PS3 controller or a wireless PS4, or use Xbox controllers or Bluetooth, all sorts. It'll all work, but the easiest one to start off with, get USB. Okay, so you can see it's finished pretty quickly there. Write successful, hit OK, and that's all you have to do there. Hit exit. And what I'll do is I'll eject this card and I'll put it in the Raspberry Pi and boot up, and you can see what we get to there, and then we'll come back to sort of more steps here. But if I stop the video there, and we'll flip to the TV view. Okay, there it is booting up. Quickly saw the 4 Raspberry Pis in the corner there. Get the RetroPie logo on the screen. Then it should jump to Emulation Station, and this is the front end for choosing all your games. And it says it's detected a gamepad. Now in my Raspberry Pi, all I've got plugged in is a keyboard and a gamepad, and it's happily detected the gamepad there. So I'm going to grab that. Like I say, my gamepad is an iBuffalo. It says classic USB gamepad and below, and it basically looks really like a old SNES style controller, and it works really well with RetroPie. So I'm going to select the controller, and we'll run through that. Now previous to version 3 beta 3, I think, so earlier releases of RetroPie like 2.3, 2.4, 2.6 even, they did this a bit differently in that when you can set your controller here, all it did was set your controller for use in Emulation Station, which is this graphical interface we'll see in a minute. It didn't set the controller up for use playing the games, but now it does that as well. So you only have to, it makes it easier basically, you only have to do it once and you're ready to go. So as it says here, hold a button on your device to configure it, and when I do that you'll see the name sort of flash up below. I've got a separate video specifically about adding USB controllers, so I won't go into too much detail now, we'll just get it up and running. So I'll press and hold that, get the text below, and it jumps to, it says what button's what. So I'm just going to follow those instructions and press my D-pad up, down, left, right, press start, select, press my A and B, X and Y. The left bottom and right bottom refer to the shoulder buttons, rather than the left. I don't have on this controller anyway, I don't have a left top, so left bottom, right bottom. It's a bit misleading because they are on the top of the controller, but it's the right ones. If you've got shoulder buttons, only 2 of them, it's the left bottom, right bottom you want to select. Now I don't have a left top, right top, and I don't have these thumb analog buttons coming up either. So as it says, if you want to skip it, just hold down any button and it'll just jump through. And you also don't have to just have one controller for RetroPie. You can configure as many different ones as you like, and it'll remember those settings. So by doing this, you're not stopping yourself changing your mind later to choose a different controller. And in the background, it's just going to write this data out to tell games what your controller is, as well as this interface that selects it. And this interface is called Emulation Station. You'll see it in a minute. Okay, that's the last one. And it'll also remember this when you reboot, so you don't have to do it every time. Okay, now to carry on here, it goes to the OK button, and to select that you press whatever you chose your A button to be. So I'm just going to tap A, and that's taken me into Emulation Station. And by default, these are the systems that appear. I've got Amiga, Apple II, IBM ports, RetroPie. RetroPie is, if I select that with A, just a jump point to various menu points, but if you're just starting out, I wouldn't touch these for the minute, we'll ignore those. And there are a lot of comments about where are the other systems, where is the Mega Drive, where's the NES, where's the Super Nintendo, where's Spectrum and Atari, all sorts. They're all there, they're all configured, they're already installed, you don't need to do anything else. The reason that the other ones aren't showing are because there aren't any games in those systems. As soon as you put a ROM game file across, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, it will automatically appear here when you restart Emulation Station. So you don't need to configure anything new or different, you just need to get the ROM across to the folder and it will show. That's why they're not there at the minute, because there aren't files. There are files in these directories and that's why they're showing. Okay, that's pretty much all you've got to do to get that up and running. I mean, that is RetroPie installed. What we'll do next is flip back to the computer and we'll just check out how to connect to the RetroPie remotely and copy files across. Now, one thing that is really important before you get too far into setting up the Raspberry Pi with RetroPie is to expand the disk space. And we're going to do that remotely, but you can do it via the TV directly. To get out of that emulation station view, you just tap F4 and then you get 5 seconds to press another button to stop it restarting emulation station automatically. So just tap another button and you can type with your attached keyboard there. I'm going to do this remotely using software called PuTTY. And you can download it here. I'll put the link in the description. You just want this one here, PuTTY, on a Intel, or if you've got a PC, use this one here. And I'm going to fire that up, PuTTY. I've just downloaded and installed that, that's all. And it says, what is the Raspberry Pi details? Now, to connect to it, you just want to say it's SSH, and the host name is going to be RetroPie because that's what it's been configured as. You could use the IP address if you get the IP address from it. At a prompt, if you've quit out of emulation station, you can just type ifconfig and it will tell you what the IP address is, but it's easier just typing the host name RetroPie. And port 22, all I've got to do is hit open, and up here, just being a bit sensitive there because my previous connection was a different machine, so I just say yes, that's fine. Probably won't get that. And you get a little prompt. Log in as user Pi, password Raspberry. Obviously your Raspberry Pi will need a network connection. It's easier with the Ethernet cable, but Wi-Fi will work as well, although you'd have to install the Wi-Fi drivers. So if you can't for whatever reason get that installed, you might want to just use a keyboard attached to the Pi itself to do these commands. So just make that a bit bigger. Now, if I type df space h, you'll see here that I'm using 95% of my card already, and I've got a 32 gig card in there, and I've only used 1.7 gig. So the reason it's all used is because the system at the moment thinks the entire card is just under 2 gig. So it's really important before you start to resize that, and you can do that by typing sudo raspi-config. And you've got an option here, expand file system. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press enter. Runs a few commands in the background, and it says the next time you reboot, that will be available. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go back to the finish option here, press enter. Do you want to reboot now? I'm going to say yes, and this disconnect me. And if you've got your Pi still attached to the TV, you'll be able to see it restarting. Okay, so I'm going to say okay. I know that's disconnected, and as soon as the RetroPie system reboots to the point of showing you the emulation station screen, it's pretty much ready to reattach, so you can reconnect. So I'm going to fire that up here, run RetroPie and port 22, press open, and I get the prompt again because it doesn't take long to reboot at all. Type password Raspberry. Now this time we should see, if I do the disk space command again, df space -h, I'm only using 6% because it realises now I've got a 32 gig card and I haven't used any more data. So now you could copy loads of ROMs across. Before, you would obviously hit a limit pretty quickly. It would still work for a while with the very small disk space, but you obviously want to create a lot more. And that's pretty much all you've got to do with RetroPie to get this working. So now you've got RetroPie RC1 installed. You can update the system, and I'll briefly show you that. Again, there's videos to show details about this, so I'm not going to explain too much about what's going on here. I'm just sudo, you can run the setup script by changing directory into the RetroPie setup folder, and then running this command, sudo //retropie_setup.sh. And it boots into it here. Now here are some of the install options. If you've got a SD card or a Linux system generally, whether it's on Raspberry Pi or anything else, you can install RetroPie using a binary based installation, which basically gets all the pre-compiled executable files and downloads it onto the Raspberry Pi or whatever system, or a source-based installation where it gets all the source code and compiles it on the device itself, which obviously takes a lot longer on a Pi, like it says, about 20 hours for a Raspberry Pi 1 and a bit less for a Raspberry Pi 2. But the way we've done this, we've just written a pre-created image. It's instantly done, and the only reason you want to do this if you want to update, so the RC1 version that on 18th of July is from the 18th of July. If there have been any significant changes after, you're not getting those unless you do an update. But to be honest, there's not often a massive need to update like that, because you could always write a new image when a new one comes out if it's got a feature that's really useful. A lot of the time the changes between one day and the next are going to be hardly anything. You really do want to have a particular reason to need to update like this, and I don't tend to update until a new version comes out, and then I'll rewrite the new image. But you might simply want to upgrade, which is fine, and in which case you can just run the binary based installation and you want to update your RetroPie setup script. But if you're just starting out, keep it like we've done it, run the image and onto the SD card, and then if you've got any problems, you can go on the forums and say, look, I'm using RetroPie 3 RC1, and everyone knows the state of your software, where you're at. If you start updating various bits, install experimentals, it can be harder to track down an issue. But obviously when you get more into it, by all means, crack on and make a few more advanced tweaks. Maybe make a backup of your SD card or use a different SD card so you don't lose what you've got. But I think really the easiest way to do it is just, as we've done, write that image. Don't do a binary based installation now. Whilst that might update your software slightly, it's not really worth it if you're just starting out, just getting to grips with it. Anyway, the reason we're here is to see that you can update that if you want, and also in the setup configuration, these are areas that you might want to change. You can change the audio settings to force the output through HDMI if you've got a problem with that. Instead of auto starting into Emulation Station, you can say drop me to the command prompt. You can change the splash screen that starts up in here as well. You can register more controllers. You can install Xbox drivers. There's all sorts of particular install settings here, but we don't really need any of those. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that for the minute, and cancel that, and keep that open. And now I'm going to get the games across, because like I say, you can't, well, obviously you can't play them until you put them on the RetroPie system, but you can't see the systems on Emulation Station before you copy games across either. Now I've got a file here, rom .gen, which is Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, a quick and easy way to get this across, particularly if you've got a internet connection or network connection with your Raspberry Pi, is press start, press // and type RetroPie again, similar to how we connected with PuTTY earlier. Press enter. By default, 3 folders are shared, and the one we want is the ROMs folder, and you've got all the systems here, and this is obviously connected to the Raspberry Pi, and I know I've got a Mega Drive game, and I'm going to drag that across, and it's done. That's all I need to do. That's the easiest way to get the ROMs across, but maybe you want to use an FTP client. That can often be useful if you've got a lot of ROMs that you want to get across, or you're used to using FTP anyway. FileZilla is a very popular one on Windows, and you can download this one here, download FileZilla client. That's what you want, and once that's installed, you can just open up FileZilla and say connect up here. Got Raspberry. Again, the host is RetroPie. Choose SFTP or -SSH. Username Pi, password Raspberry. Hit connect. That's again just saying this is a new system. Does it matter? No, it's fine. Okay. And here you've got, it goes to your home directory. Now the ROMs are in RetroPie, so you double click there, double click ROMs, and then you've got your systems again. And we were in Mega Drive. There you go. You've got Sonic, and you could just copy using FileZilla. So if I go to my desktop, I've got Sonic the Hedgehog. I could drag that across again if I wanted, or the other one. So it's just another way of connecting to get your ROMs across, really. Once you've done that, you can restart Emulation Station, and you should see that appear. So we're going to flip back to Emulation Station now and see that one pop up. Okay, back in Emulation Station, you can see as we left it, there's still no Mega Drive or Genesis if you're in the States. There's no option for that. So I just want to restart Emulation Station to get it to look again. Press the start button, choose quit, say quit Emulation Station rather than the other two options. Select A, yes, and that's, you can see at the bottom there, Emulation Station will restart in 5 seconds. Press a key if you don't want that to happen, but just let that run. It automatically restarts Emulation Station. And now if I scroll across, you can see Mega Drive, that's appeared. And if I select that, we've got the ROM that we've put there, and select that with A, and it should use RetroArch, the default setup there, to control it. So let's just see if that works. There you go, you can see that's quite happily working, and that is all you need to do to get up and running with RetroPie. It really doesn't take that long, and obviously there are a lot more features to it, but at a very basic level it's quick and easy to get up and running with, and the system to get it installed on your Raspberry Pi, and copy game over and start playing it. You might see it on this screen at the moment, it's a little bit blocky, because I'm on a sort of LCD TV, but there's separate videos about the whole video output side of things, so you can always tweak that if you want, along with a lot of other settings. But that's everything I think you'll need to get up and running. Obviously if there is anything else, do go to those forums I showed at the start of the video and ask questions. If there's something about the video, do put it in the comments and let me know, and I'll see if I can make any updates to that and give you more information. But really it's just a video to recap on with RetroPie 3 RC1, the quickest way to get that up and running on a Raspberry Pi. And once you've done that, you'll probably try out a few other systems, add a few different ROMs. They work at, some of the emulators work in slightly different ways, so you get used to some of those, but if you just want to simply play some of the retro games, you can see it's all pretty easy. Anyway, I hope the video was useful. If it was, please do hit the thumbs up icon, because it helps me know that these are of some use. And happy gaming!